Hi, everyone. Good to be back with you to continue a lesson that we started the last time we were together, a lesson that I call Danger in Delay. And want to recap just a little bit what we talked about in the previous lesson, and then we'll get into the conclusion of this particular lesson. We were using Luke chapter 12, beginning at verse 13, as the text for this lesson. So if you have your Bibles, open it to that section. That's Luke 12, beginning at verse 13. Most Bibles entitle this the parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teachers, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kind of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And there I'll store all my grain and all my goods that I have laid up for many years. Take life easy," he said. "Eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God." Now, I'm sure this man made a lot of mistakes in his life, but being successful was not one of those mistakes. A lot of God's servants in the Old Testament and down through history have been very successful. And God doesn't punish people for being successful. What happened with this man is he was resting on all of the things that he had accumulated. And he was counting on the fact that he was going to have plenty of time to use the things that he had. And what we suggested in our first lesson is not to commit the same folly that this man committed, and that is counting on tomorrow. And if you're not a Christian tonight, I hope that you'll think seriously about becoming a Christian. And if you're not living a good, faithful Christian life, I hope you'll consider that as well and decide that you're going to live successfully for God. It's been suggested that when we put things off until tomorrow, we recognize that there's a need to change, but we're not willing to do it right now. We also believe this change is going to be unpleasant and distasteful. Otherwise, we'd go ahead and do it now, but we're postponing it. And for some reason, we think it's going to be easier to change tomorrow than what it is today. And then the greatest folly of all is we're counting on a tomorrow. We believe that there's going to be a tomorrow for us. And we showed in our first lesson that counting on tomorrow for a lot of people has brought disaster. For example, in the academic realm, students put off studying like they should, and when reckoning time comes, the test or whatever, they're unprepared for it and they fail. The same thing in the medical realm. So many times people recognize that they have some physical problems, but they feel like, with me, it's not that serious, and I'll take care of it later. And in the military realm, we showed where people who have had an advantage have put off taking up that advantage in order to secure a victory. And we don't want that to happen to you, and I don't want it to happen to me. And yet many people down through history have lost their eternal souls because they waited until tomorrow. One example of this is the Athenians. When Paul left Thessalonica, he went down to the city of Berea. And he left Berea and he went down to the city of Athens. And as he was walking around in Athens, he noticed all of these idols and all of these subscriptions. And he noticed one, that idol that was inscribed to the unknown God. And Paul says, I'm going to declare that unknown God to you. And so he tells them about the one and only God, the creator of the universe, and his son Jesus. Now, a lot of people, Athens was one of these intellectual cities, and a lot of people in that city felt that they were too intelligent and too knowledgeable to accept what Paul was saying. But there was a few people that in the city that was intrigued by what Paul had to say. And in Acts chapter 17 and in verse 32, they said to Paul, "We want to hear you again on this subject." But folks, you can search all you want, and you'll not find where these people ever heard Paul again on this subject. You see, they had the opportunity, but they let that opportunity get away from them. Instead of saying, "Let's do it right now," they said, "Let's do it later. We'll hear you later, Paul, on this subject." But they never did. Not as far as we know, they never did. And you know, that's a problem, that many people, they have good intentions. Well, we'll do it, but we'll do it later. But life has a way of getting in the way. And these people never again, as far as we know, heard Paul talk about the God of heaven and his son, Jesus Christ. Well, something similar to that happened when Paul was making his defense against Felix. And we're in Acts chapter 24 now. And Paul reasoned with Felix about righteousness, self-control, and judgment. And he was so convincing about these things that it says Felix was afraid. He was scared. But he said to Paul, "When it's convenient, I'm going to send for you to hear more about this." But the problem is, as far as we know, Felix never sent for Paul, and he never heard him again on this subject. He had the opportunity. He could have listened. He could have applied what Paul had to say, and he could have made a change, but he put it off. And as far as we know, time got away from him, and he never again heard Paul on this subject. About the same thing happened with King Agrippa. Paul was referred to him now in Acts chapter 26, and he's making his defense before King Agrippa. And he's talking about some of these same things. The only thing is, he said Agrippa already knew about some of these things. And Agrippa responds in Acts 26:26. He said, "Almost," and talking to Paul, he said, "Almost you persuade me to be a Christian." But as far as we know, he didn't become a Christian. That he never became a Christian. He had the opportunity. He was almost persuaded. But as far as we know, he never again heard what he needed to hear in order to become a child of God. He put it off. Putting it off, delaying it, is a dangerous thing. Someone has well written, "On the plains of hesitation lie the bleached bones of countless millions, who on the dawn of victory sat down to rest, and in resting died." You see, these people, according to this little poem, had victory in their sights, but they hesitated, they delayed, they rested, and in resting, they died. Well, the point of what I'm trying to say to us in this particular lesson is, there are some important things that we need to take care of, and we don't need to put it off. We need to make sure that, we take care of those things, and we take care of them now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, I make plans. They're tentative plans. If they don't work out, that's going to be okay. But I'm not putting all of my security in the basket of tomorrow. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 1 says, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I don't know what it's going to bring. You don't know what it's going to bring. Tomorrow could bring a hardness and a callousness of heart. It might be impossible for me to change tomorrow. You see, today I might want to change. Today I might want to become a Christian. Tomorrow I don't know, because I may have so changed that I'm not interested anymore. But today I am. Well, if I am today, today's when I need to take care of it. I remember hearing about a poor church member, a farmer out in Texas many years ago. And he was always heard to say, boy, if I had money, I would give it to the church. I mean, if I was rich, if my farm really produced and I had money, I would give it to the church. Well, some well-meaning deacons remembered what he had said, and he ended up striking oil on his farm, and he became a very wealthy man. But these deacons noticed that the contribution never went up, and they remembered what he said about if I had money, I'd give it to the church. So they took it upon themselves to go out and see this farmer. And they reminded him of what he had said. And he said, yes, I remember that. He said, years ago, I had desire, but I didn't have any money. He said, today, I have money, but I don't have the desire. You see, that's what happens to us. This man, things changed for him because now he no longer had the desire to do what he was wanting to do way back when. And this happens to a lot of us. Bad habits have a way of getting a hold on our lives. And when it gets this hold on our lives, it don't want to let go. I may decide that, okay, I'm ready to quit doing this, and I'm not going to do it anymore. But that sin, that vice, that bad habit may have such a hold on me that no matter how hard I try, I can't quit. I've talked to a lot of drinkers who had a desire to quit drinking. But they would say to me, no matter how hard I try, I can't. You see, the alcoholic may have a desire to turn loose of the alcohol, but the alcohol may not want to turn loose of him. And that's the way it is with bad habits. It might be drugs, it might be smoking or drinking, whatever it is. When I decide I'm finished with it, it may not be finished with me. And so it's, a hard thing for us to do is to turn loose. I've heard people who are involved in bad habits say, well, I can quit anytime I want to. I don't have to do this. I can quit anytime I want to. Well, one thing I learned is people who make that statement, when they say I can take it or leave it, are always taking it and not leaving it. And that's the way it is with bad habits. Today I may have a desire to get rid of those bad habits. Well, I need to do it. I need to do it today. I need to stop whatever it is. Turn my life over to the Lord. If you have that desire today, do it today. Don't wait and don't put it off, because you see, it's dangerous. Tomorrow, while you have a soft, pliable, willing heart today, tomorrow it may not be that way. It may be so hardened and so calloused that there is no way that you can stop what you're doing and turn your life over to the Lord. The Bible says that we can get that way. Paul mentions in 1 Timothy 4, 1 and 2 about having our consciences seared as with a hot iron. That means that, it's calloused over to a sense that it no longer is affected by the things that it's hearing. It's no longer desirous to make that change that needs to be made. Well, what am I going to do when I reach that point? Well, it may be nothing that you can do. Paul told the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 19, he said that they had lost all sensitivity, having given themselves over to sensualities and immoral acts and impurities. Being past feeling is what he's talking about. We can get to the point to where the message of God no longer penetrates us. When I was in the military many, many years ago, I was stationed in the country of Japan. And I was on a little island off of the coast of Japan. And we had a visit from the dentist on our island one day. And he began to check all of us. When he got to me, he said, "You've got a couple of cavities that need to be fixed. And we're going to send you TDY down to Tokyo." TDY was temporary duty. We're going to send you on this temporary duty to get your couple of teeth fixed. Well, they shipped me down there, and they told me, gave me the instructions that I'm to go into the dentist office every morning at 8 o'clock, and I'm to stay there until 4:30 in the afternoon. And if they have a cancellation, they'll call me in and fix my teeth. Well, I was given a week of TDY. And at the end of that first week, I had not seen the dentist. And so they said, "Okay, we'll extend your TDY for another week." Well, I was getting to the end of that week, and I still had not seen the dentist. And so they were not going to extend me any longer, so they finally decided they had to get me in to see the dentist. So I went in and sat down, and the dentist said, "Now I'm going to give you a shot back here in your jaw." Well, I've never had a shot like that, never had one before, and I've never had one since. And I, watching the hand motion of the dentist, when he stuck that needle in, I could see him maneuvering that syringe around and pushing it all the time. I believe I felt that needle up here in my head. And finally, he got where he wanted it, and he, shoved that Novocaine in to deaden my teeth. Well, I got dead like I've never been before, all the way around my face, on this side over here, from here all the way around to about the center of my nose. I was dead here. I was dead in my chin. I was dead down in my neck, over on the side of my face. I was dead everywhere except over on this side. I wasn't dead over here. Well, they fixed the tooth over here. And once they got that one fixed, he said, "You go out and sit in the waiting room, and I'll call you back in a few minutes." Well, I thought, sure, he was going to fix another tooth over on this side. But when I got back in, he gave me a shot not on this side, but over on this side. The same kind of shot that he had given me, over here. And so now, I'm getting dead on this side from here all the way around to about the center of my nose. And it meant I was dead all over my face. And they fixed the tooth over on this side. And he said, "Okay, you can go to lunch." Well, that was kind of a foolish thing to say to a 17-year-old, that now you can go eat. Well, at least I was smart enough not to get anything that had to be chewed. I got some soup. And I was sitting at the table with some of my fellow airmen, and I was eating this soup. And they got to laughing at me. And I said, "What are you laughing about?" They said, "You've got soup all over you. It's running down your chin, down onto your shirt." Well, I didn't know it because I couldn't feel it. I was dead all over. I couldn't feel anything. I was past feeling. Well, I think sometimes, while it's not literal, I think sometimes the devil has that kind of Novocaine, and he shoots us with it. And we're not able to feel anything. I had used that illustration several times in a sermon, and I thought, people thought I just made it up. But I was preaching this down in Florida one time, and a fellow walked out and he said, "Hey, you want to know what kind of shot that was?" I said, "Did you believe me?" He said, "Yeah, I believed you." He said, "I'm a dentist." He said, "We used to use that, but we don't use it anymore." He said, "It's called a trigeminal nerve block." And he said, "It just blocks everything all the way around." And I believe that, Satan has something similar to that he shoots us with. It's a serious condition when we get to the point where the Word of God no longer affects us. I've often wondered how many people sit in our audiences on Sundays and they hear the message of God, but it never really penetrates their hearts so that they respond to the message that's being preached. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 12 says, "The Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword." It's able to cut, but we have to listen to it and we have to apply it if it's going to make that kind of change in our lives. Also, while tomorrow we may be so hardened and calloused we can't respond to God's invitation, tomorrow could bring death. Well, it's brought death to a lot of people tomorrow. I just got word today that I had a cousin that passed away yesterday. One day she's alive, but the next day she's gone. We've had some people in our local congregation that have been in accidents. In fact, I got word last night that the sister of one of our members was found floating in a pond, and she was deceased. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but tomorrow could bring death. And if I need to respond to the gospel today, I need to do it. It's important that I take care of it now. When I was preaching in Florida, Ocala, Florida, we had a gospel meeting. And the preacher and myself went out to talk to this gentleman and his son. The father was 72 years old. The son was 15 years old. The mother was a member of our congregation. And we pleaded with this father and son to become Christians. Let us help you complete your obedience. And I remember the father. He's 72 years old now. I remember him saying, "I promise you that I'm going to take care of that someday. Not today, but someday I'm going to take care of that." Well, I can tell you for a fact that he died never having taken care of it. He had the opportunity. We were there. We wanted to assist him, but he said later, let's put it off. And he delayed. And delay, brings disaster. The 15-year-old son promised us. He said, "Before I turn 16, I'll become a Christian." Well, that young man, before his 16th birthday, dove off of a pier into a lake in Florida, and he hit a piling with his head under the water that he didn't see, broke his neck, and he died. He died before becoming 16 years of age. He died before ever becoming a Christian. It's important to take care of those things now. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. My grandfather was having lunch with some of his friends, and he excused himself to go to the bathroom. And he was gone for longer than he should have been, and the friends got up to go check on him. And they found him lying in the bathroom floor, deceased. We never know what tomorrow is going to bring. And it's so important. If there are things we need to take care of today, take care of it. We picture ourselves being 100 years of age in a highly antiseptic hospital room with, white sheets, family gathered around, everybody smiling, and us drifting off into an eternal sleep. But, statistics tell us that death will come for the majority of us suddenly and unexpectedly. We don't know what's going to happen on tomorrow. You need to take care of it today. Tomorrow brings disaster. It may bring the judgment. The Bible's very clear. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. It's appointed unto man once to die, and after this comes the judgment. Let me ask you this serious question. We're fixing to close. Let me ask you this serious question. If tomorrow brought death for you, what kind of day would it be? Would it be a day of wrath, vengeance, fire, or would it be a day of joy and happiness? That's going to be determined by whatever decision you make today. Don't put off taking care of important things. The Bible doesn't stress tomorrow. It stresses today. John chapter 9, verse 4 says we must work the works of him that sent us while it is yet day, or today. For the night comes when no man works. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 15 says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. Or 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 2, I tell you, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation. Folks, salvation is today. Don't put off doing important things. Postponement and delay brings disaster. Don't let it bring disaster for you. I look forward to being with you the next time. If you need to act on things that you need to do it today. Take care of it now. I'll see you the next time we get together. Have a good night.